Di negara Nepal, tidak jauh dari perbatasan India, terletak sebuah kota yang bernama Bhairawa, dan sekarang sudah berganti nama menjadi Siddhartha Nagar. 18 km ke arah barat dari kota kecil inilah terletak Taman Lumbini, taman suci bagi umat Buddha. Sekarang kita berada di Taman Lumbini, tempat lahir Pangeran Siddhartha, Bodhisatta calon Buddha. Saya akan memperkenalkan sahabat saya, Dr. Basanta Bidari, Kepala Ahli Purbakala dari pengembangan Taman Lumbini. How are you, sir?
I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you. So, Dr. Basanta Bidari telah menulis sebuah buku yang sangat baik sekali mengenai Taman Lumbini. Dan selain itu, beliau juga menulis sebuah buku mengenai Kapilawastu. Kedua buku ini sangat bagus untuk dijadikan referensi bagi Anda sekalian yang berminat untuk mendalami mengenai kedua tempat suci Buddhis ini. Kita sekarang berada di Kapilawastu, tempat yang sangat penting karena disinilah Pangeran Siddhartha tinggal selama 30 tahun pertama dalam kehidupannya. Bukan itu saja, di istana inilah berlangsung upacara pemberian nama Siddhartha baginya. Disinilah beliau menikah pada usia 16 tahun dan hidup bersama dengan putri Yasodhara. Disinilah Rahula, putra beliau, dilahirkan. Dan dari tempat inilah Pangeran Siddhartha meninggalkan kemewahan istana, berangkat menuju arah tenggara, menyeberangi sungai Anoma, dan memulai kehidupan sebagai petapa di hutan belantara. Kapilawatu atau Kapilawastu dikelilingi tembok yang membentengi seluruh kawasan ini. Sayang, tembok tebal itu kini hanya tinggal bekas-bekasnya saja. Ada 4 pintu gerbang. Gerbang utara dan selatan masih sedang dalam taraf penggalian kembali. Yang paling istimewa adalah gerbang timur yang kita kenal sebagai Mahabiniskramagara, karena melalui gerbang inilah Pangeran Siddhartha berangkat meninggalkan istana. Karena itu, gerbang timur ini juga disebut sebagai Manggalaghara atau gerbang penuh berkah. Agak jauh di luar gerbang timur, kita masih bisa melihat sebuah gundukan tanah. Diperkirakan itulah bekas-bekas stupa Kantaka Niwartana yang didirikan untuk memperingati tempat kematian kuda Kantaka. Kita tahu bahwa setelah mengantarkan Pangeran Siddhartha menyeberangi sungai Anoma, kuda Kantaka dan kusirnya Cana kembali ke Kapilawastu. Namun begitu melihat istana, Kantaka merasakan kesedihan yang sangat mendalam karena berpisah dari Pangeran Siddhartha dan langsung meninggal. Lokasi arkeologis Kapilawastu ditemukan oleh Jenderal Khadga Sanserana dari Nepal dan ahli purbakala Dr. Feurer dari Jerman pada tahun 1899. Namun penggalian yang serius baru dimulai pada tahun 1995 oleh pemerintah Nepal, sehingga saat ini baru sebagian saja yang bisa kita saksikan.
It's a Sakya capital, and in ancient Buddhist literature, Kapilavastu means it's a name of a kingdom as well as the name of a capital. The Kapilavastu denotes for the both. So the capital we are at present, we are in the capital city.
Kerajaan Kapilawastu berbatasan dengan kerajaan Dewa Daha. Kapilawastu dihuni oleh suku Sakya dan Dewa Daha oleh suku Kolia. Di tengah-tengah antara kedua wilayah kerajaan ini terletak sebuah taman yang indah, yaitu Taman Lumbini. Orang-orang Sakya lazim menikah dengan suku Kolia, begitu juga sebaliknya. Kita tahu bahwa ibunda Pangeran Siddhartha, putri Mahamaya dari suku Kolia, menikah dengan Raja Sudodana dari Kapilawastu. Demikian juga ibu pengasuh Pangeran Siddhartha, yaitu Dewi Prajapati, berasal dari suku Kolia. Demikianlah, ketika sudah tiba saatnya untuk melahirkan, Ratu Mahamaya meminta izin dari Raja Sudodana untuk kembali ke istana orang tuanya di Dewa Daha. Di tengah perjalanan, beliau beristirahat di Taman Lumbini. Saat itu, pada waktu bulan Purnama Sidi, di bulan Wesak, lahirlah Sang Tathagata. Ago hang asmi lokasa, jeto hang asmi lokasa, seto hang asmi lokasa, ayang antima jati, nati dani puna bhawa.
Patipanno bhagavato sāvaka saṅghō sāmīci patipanno bhagavato sāvaka saṅghō yadidam cattārītam sayugāni yattam Sawakatu bhagavata dhammo dhammang namassami.
माया देवी
ऊपर गए थे क्या इथे चाबुकशाचे झाड होते इथं आणि इथूनच मग त्या अशा पाणथ्या धरून वरत गेल्या होत्या ना खाली आल्या
तेच
वृक्षाचं झाड तोडलं असते
नाही समजलं
Bahwa disinilah tempat kelahiran Buddha, Asoka mendirikan sebuah tugu yang kita kenal sekarang dengan nama Tugu Asoka. Tugu Asoka ini aslinya setinggi 9,41 meter dan di atasnya terdapat patung kuda setinggi 2,74 meter. Sehingga total tinggi sebenarnya adalah 12,15 meter. Tetapi sekarang ini bagian atasnya sudah tidak ada dan bagian bawahnya terpendam di dalam tanah sebanyak 2 meter lebih. Sehingga yang terlihat sekarang hanya 6,91 meter. Terdapat tulisan yang berbunyi Dewana, Piena, Piadasina, dan seterusnya, dan seterusnya. Yang artinya adalah yang dicintai oleh para dewa, yaitu Raja Piyadasi atau Asoka, pada tahun ke-20 dari penahbisannya, beliau sendiri datang ke tempat ini, ke tempat di mana Buddha Sakyamuni dilahirkan. Raja Asoka kemudian mendirikan pagar yang terbuat dari batu dan sebuah tugu dari batu untuk menandai bahwa disinilah Tathagata dilahirkan. Desa Lumbini kemudian dibebaskan dari membayar pajak dan selanjutnya pajak itu dipergunakan untuk kepentingan penyebaran Dhamma.
Dari purisa yukhani atta purisa puk Yesa bhagavato sawaka sangho ahunayo pahunayo nakinayo anjat pitra jaranano
Saranam gacchami Dhammam saranam gacchami
Sangkon ditangga dari purisa yukhani atta purisa Bhagavato sawaka sangho Bhagavata Dhammo Sanjitiko Akariko Ehipasiko Opanayiko Bhajatang Vedita Purinyo Bhagavato sawaka sangho Angjatari purisa waka sangho Ahunayo pahunayo Yo anjari karaniyo
Thôi kìa, kìa cái gì? Với bãi tao.
concept of master plan began in Lumbini from 1967 when U Thant, the UN Secretary General, who came to Lumbini, and during that time Lumbini was...
Master Plan Lumbini dimulai tahun 1956. Sekretaris Jenderal PBB saat itu, mendiang U Thant yang berasal dari Myanmar, berziarah ke tempat ini dan sangat prihatin melihat kondisi Lumbini. Atas persetujuan Raja Nepal pada waktu itu, mendiang Raja Mahendra, PBB akhirnya membentuk badan internasional yang bertugas mengembangkan area Taman Lumbini sebagai pusat ziarah dan pusat wisata. Badan Internasional Pengembangan Taman Lumbini, anggotanya terdiri dari 30 negara. Bahkan negara-negara Islam seperti Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh, dan juga Malaysia turut serta sebagai anggotanya. Tahun 1970, berdasarkan master plan yang dirancang oleh arsitek terkenal Profesor Kenjo Tange dari Jepang, dimulailah pengembangan Taman Lumbini. Ada sektor utama, yaitu Taman Lumbini yang dikhususkan sebagai tempat suci. Daerah sekelilingnya ditetapkan sebagai monastic zone, yaitu zona kedua untuk mendirikan wihara-wihara dari berbagai negara dan berbagai organisasi internasional yang membuat Lumbini benar-benar menjadi pusat agama Buddha dengan berbagai keragaman budaya dan tradisi. Lebih luas lagi, zona ketiga adalah daerah penunjang, berupa desa Lumbini baru, tempat tinggal para penduduk, hotel-hotel, restoran, dan sarana penunjang lainnya. Saat ini sudah dibangun lebih dari 27 wihara di sekitar Taman Lumbini.
Hãy subscribe cho kênh Ghiền Mì Gõ để không bỏ lỡ
संघं शरणं गच्छामि धम्मं शरणं गच्छामि संघं शरणं गच्छामि द्वितीयम्पि बुद्धं शरणं गच्छामि द्वितीयम्पि धम्मं शरणं गच्छामि द्वितीयम्पि संघं शरणं गच्छामि.
So the backside of me is a big stupa. This stupa represents a existence of Lord Buddha. It is associated with his life.
Di belakang saya ada reruntuhan sebuah stupa. Stupa ini melambangkan Buddha, berhubungan dengan kehidupan Buddha. Ini adalah sesuatu yang sangat suci.
Mostly they come, just taking the photograph, walk around.
Sekarang ini banyak peziarah dan wisatawan yang datang ke Lumbini. Semakin hari semakin banyak. Sayang, kebanyakan begitu mereka tiba di sini langsung berfoto. Potret sana, potret sini, berjalan-jalan melihat ke sana kemari tanpa merasakan kedamaian.
Coming here. What is
Di satu pihak kita mendorong pariwisata, di lain pihak ada kekurangan dari para wisatawan yang datang. Kita perlu lebih menggali supaya mengerti siapakah Buddha, di mana beliau dilahirkan, mengapa saya datang ke tempat ini, apa maksud dan tujuan saya datang ke tempat ini. Bukan untuk berpiknik, bukan untuk berfoto, bukan untuk ngobrol bersama teman-teman. Kalau kita datang ke Lumbini, hendaknya kita menyadari sepenuhnya bahwa kita berada di tempat Buddha dilahirkan. Inilah tempat kelahiran guru kita. Kedamaian inilah yang perlu kita rasakan di Lumbini. Perjalanan kita menuju ke Taman Lumbini bisa ditempuh dengan berbagai cara. Tetapi begitu kita tiba di pintu gerbang, perjalanan ke dalam hanya bisa dilakukan dengan dua cara. Anda bisa memilih, seperti saya, berjalan kaki, atau seperti mereka naik beca.
And 75 district. So one of the zone is a Lumbini zone. So in this zone we have a 6 district. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Out of these 6 districts, 3 districts are very, very important in the point of view of Buddhism and in the point of view of archaeology. In these 3 districts, you have a Kapilavastu, you have a Devadaha kingdom, you have a Lumbini. So Kapilavastu, which was ruled by the Sakyas, Devadaha, which is ruled by the Koliyas, and the Lumbini, it was a beautiful garden which was maintained by Devadaha, Koliya, and the Kapilavastu of Sakya. So, as the literature mentioned that Sakya and Koliyas, they had a matrimonial alliances. Sakya used to marry the Koliyas and Koliya used to marry the Sakya. So Maya Devi, mother of Lord Buddha, she was married to Sakya king of Kapilavastu. And not only Maya Devi, even the Prajapati, step mother of Lord Buddha. So Lumbini is here and now we are here. So we travel almost like a 28 kilometers. From Lumbini to Devadaha, Rasi, Devadaha, somewhere Devadaha. It is 32 kilometers. So altogether from here to here was 70 kilometers. So the mode of transportation was mostly common people, they travel by the bullock cart. So but the royalties, they used to travel by palanquin. So to travel 70 kilometers in a single day, it was not possible. So people, they used to come somewhere in the center, in the middle, spend a night, and next day they used to go to their place respectively. So Maya Devi, when she conceived a baby, she was going to her parents' house in Devadaha. So she arrived in Lumbini. So Lumbini, as I mentioned, was a beautiful garden. So evening time, Maya Devi carrying a baby in her womb, walking very slowly, enjoying the ceremony of Lumbini. Suddenly she felt a delivery pain and she gave birth to her son. Then the whole troop, they came back to Kapilavastu. Tilarakota is the capital city. Now we are in the capital city of the Kapilavastu kingdom. So this is where Siddhartha, he spent his 29 years of his life. And not only that, this is the place, his first naming ceremony was given. He was named as a Siddhartha. Siddhartha means 2 words, Siddha Artha. The literary meaning means whatever he wishes, which is accomplished. So he was given the name Siddhartha. This is where he was married in the age of 16. This is where he had a son, Rahula. In the age of 29, he left this place and he traveled to the southeast and reached the river Anoma, crossed the river Anoma, then he entered to the jungle. So that's why in this area we have so many archaeological sites. So all these black dots, they are the archaeological sites. That indicates that how much rich archaeologically in this part of Nepal in Buddha time. So even here, it is a pillar, you have one pillar, which is a birthplace of Kanakamuni Buddha. This is Kanaka. You have another other pillar is Bodhihawa. It is the birthplace of Krakuchanda Buddha. This is the place where we visited, is ancient Nigrodharama, and these are all the archaeological sites. You see the concentration of civic life. When you have a capital city, you need a civic life in and around. This is the most potential archaeological site in Nepal.
And could you refer again to the story that when Buddha explained to King Bimbisar where he came from,
Yeah.
he mentioned something about the river and
Yes, and he said the river Bhagirathi. To the east bank of river Bhagirathi, this is the site. This is the river Bhagirathi. Presently it is known as Banaganga. Banaganga means Ganga is a sacred river flowing through the forest. So it is known as Banaganga presently. But in ancient Buddhist literature, you find this name of this river is Bhagirathi. Bhagirathi. It is, it's a Sakya capital. And in ancient Buddhist literature, Kapilavastu means it's a name of a kingdom as well as a name of a capital. The Kapilavastu denotes for the both. So the capital, at present we are in the capital city. The position of the capital city, take just a minute, is north-south. This is 1700 feet. This is east-west. This is 1300 feet. So whole this citadel, you have a 22 feet wide moat. The road which we are seeing it is on the top of the moat. So then after the moat, we have a 10 feet wide defense wall. So these are the wall. So these are the wall. So this wall which encircle the whole citadel. We checked every 10-15 meter there is a wall. So now we have a program to open this whole wall of the citadel at first. Then only we will enter to the city. So you have a 10 feet wide defense wall and moat, and the water of this river Bhagirathi, which used to flow in that moat and encircle the citadel, then it flow back to its own course. So it is for the defense purpose. So 22 feet wide means it is very difficult to jump. Then comes, you have a defense wall. Now the question is, now we have only the foundation of the defense wall. How high it was, it is very difficult to tell you. But some early Buddhist literature, like Ashwaghosa's Buddha Charita, even the Lalit Vistara, they mention that this Kapilavastu defense wall was 17 hasta tall. Hasta, the measurement is from the hand. It's something like a 24-25 feet tall. Then inside this wall, all this settlement, like a market, industry, business people, they all used to stay inside it. Very interestingly, the ancient trade route, which is known as Uttara Patha, or northern trade route, which used to passes inside the city. Because from our excavation, we found so many foreign goods. Especially if I give you an example, it is a bead. So there were 18 different types of stone that used to make a bead. Like a very famous stone like a carnelian, agate, jasper, lapis lazuli, quartzite, even gneiss, they were found from our excavation. That indicates that because in Nepal, in surrounding area, we do not have any quarry of this stone. These stones were brought from the Afghanistan. The traders, the business people, they used to bring all these goods from one place to another place, and they used to sell it and go to next place. So like that, Tilarakot was one of the major city in Buddha time for the business people, for the traders. And the trade route, which begin from Rajgir up to Taxila, that is something like a 1360 kilometer long ancient trade route, and which covers the whole of north of India. Even Ashoka pillar, which we are seeing in Lumbini, and two other pillars here, these pillars were brought through that ancient trade route. If I give you an example of Lumbini pillar, today it is 37 tons. If you put the bracket figure, the horse capital on the top, it will become a 40 tons. So Ashoka brought 3 pillars at that time. So it is about 120 tons. If there is no good road, this ancient trade route not only denotes for the business road, even if you see today, there are so many Ashokan pillars, they are lying on the bank of this, on the roadside of this ancient trade route. From Rajgir, you come to Patliputra, there is a pillar. Come to Baisali, there is a pillar. Come to Luria Araz, come to Luria Nandangarh, then Rampurua, then you have a Lumbini, then you have a Niglihawa, then you have a Gotihawa and Shravasti. So this indicates that the ancient trade route. So without having a good road, it is quite impossible to bring such a heavy pillars. So Tilarakot, the capital city of the Sakyas, that directly falls in that ancient trade route. Because some of the artifacts which we found from here, like the earliest pottery, this is called the painted grave of 8th, 7th century BC from here. Now questions comes. Who were the people they used this pottery? So according to Lalit Bistara, there is a genealogical list of the Sakya dynasty. Sudhodhana is the 4th king of Sakya. Before him there were 3 other Sakyas, they ruled in Kapilavastu. So these early, these artifacts probably used by the early Sakya rulers in Kapilavastu. Then you have another type of pottery which is called northern black polished ware. This is very common pottery in a Buddha places. This is commonly known as a Buddhist pottery. All the Buddhist sites you will find this type of pottery, either in Kushinara or Nalanda or Rajgir or Bodh Gaya or Shravasti, all the Buddhist sites. So this particular pottery was immersed at that period. Then you have so many other figures like animal figures, human figures, beads, bangles, which I mentioned it. So ultimately this site of this one, it was a big kingdom, Kapilavastu kingdom, according to Buddhist literature, something like a 280 kilometer in radius. I was talking with Singzi about the southern border, northern border, eastern border and western border of Kapilavastu. So the place where we are standing is the place where Siddhartha, he lived for 29 years of his early childhood. So the site is important in an archaeological point of view and important in a Buddhist point of view. Very interestingly, this place was visited by Emperor Ashoka and Chinese pilgrims like Sensai, Fashan, Yuanchang. It shows that from 4th century AD to 12th century AD, there were 139 Chinese pilgrims. They visited these holy places, but unfortunately, we do not have the record of all the Chinese pilgrims. Only some Chinese pilgrims record is available today. So we are here in one of the most important site. And again, I was talking about the moat. If you see the river Bhagirathi, the water of that river was used for the defense purpose. And earlier, that signboard that shows that so many civic life in and around the capital should be covered by the civic life. So this potentiality is with the Tilarakot today. Western Gate. According to Chinese pilgrims' record, when they came here, they saw the 4 gates in the 4 directions of the site. So this is a western gate, and this side we have a eastern gate which we have opened it, and northern gate and southern gate it to be open. So in the western gate we have a 3 gateway system. Please come. There were 3 gateway system. This is a 19 feet wide road. Then if someone comes out from the city, this is the first gate they have to pass. These 2 rooms is for the security post. When the people they come, they have to go to the security, they check it, then they go to the second gate. So this is the second gate. Second gate, we do not have any security. They have a security at the first gate, they cross the second gate, then they go to the third gate. Come closer. This is the third gate. So again we have a security post in the third gate. And outside of the gate there is a moat. So how people they cross the moat? So probably there was a lift bridge system. So morning they used to lift down and at night time they used to lift it up. And very interestingly there are two gaps. That is a gap, this side, and other side there is a gap. This back side of you, that gap. That indicates that probably the gateway system was double stories. So this gap may be the wooden staircase to go to second floor. So the gate is well secured and well protected. So I'm standing at the eastern gate of Kapilavastu. This gate is known as Mahabhiniskramana Dwara, or the gate through which Lord Buddha took a great renunciation from here. And it is also known as a Mangala Dwara, or auspicious gate. So this gate is flanked by 19 feet road. And these two walls which you are seeing we found in the same position. This indicates that probably there were some earthquake or some water table became very high and these structures they sunk down. So Lord Buddha, he left this palace, this gate, and traveled whole night and reached on the bank of river Anuma. Then he sent back his all royal dress and ornament back to Kapilavastu with his charioteer Channa and horse Kanthaka. Some literature mentions that the far away this mount, when Kanthaka arrived there, he saw the palace and he couldn't bear the depart of the master, so he passed away there. So the people, they make a stupa there to commemorate of Kanthaka's that spot, which is known as Kanthaka's Nirvirtana, or it is a dead place of Kanthaka. So this gate is excavated in 1899, then we conserved it in 1995, almost like after 100 years later. So it is very much similar like a Western Gateway complex. There also we found the 19 feet wide road, and same as here also we found the 19 feet wide road. The most important thing is that from this gate we found one terracotta seal. That terracotta seal mentioned that Saka Nasya. Saka Nasya. That means that Sakyas. This belongs to Sakyas, the meaning of. That is one of the most important finding of the gate. And not only that, it is in the Brahmi script of 3rd century BC. So this is an important discovery. And as usual, other findings like a painted greyware, northern black polished ware, like we have the bead, animal figures, terracotta figurines. These are the very common things which we found from our excavation. At the place called Niglihawa, and it is believed that this is the birthplace of Kanakamuni Buddha. Kanakamuni Buddha was the earlier than the Sakyamuni Buddha. So this place was visited by Emperor Ashoka in the 3rd century BC. Then he erected this pillar and he inscribed this inscription. this inscription clearly mentioned that Emperor Ashoka, in the 14th year of his reign, he enlarged the stupa of Kanakamuni, and 20th year he came himself and he worshipped the birthplace of Kanakamuni Buddha. So later on, this place was visited by both the Chinese pilgrims, Fashan and Yuan Chang. So here is one inscription which is engraved in the 14th century by one Nepali king. So it is his name, Ripu Malla Chidam Jayatu, and there is a date 1234. This indicates that this place was an important religious and pilgrimage site even in the 14th century, and after that something happened to this place and this place is forgotten. Only in the 19th century again this pillar was rediscovered by Dr. Fuller, highlighted by Lord Buddha himself. From his deathbed, he asked to his disciple to visit 4 places. First he said, you go to Lumbini, then Bodh Gaya, Sarnath and Kushinara. These places, Lumbini where he was born, Bodh Gaya where he was enlightened, Sarnath where he preached his first Dhamma, and Kushinara where he passed away. He categorically asked the disciple, you visit these places with faith, with devotion and with mindfulness. So the faith is totally different than the belief. Faith, it should come from your heart. And devotion not to the teacher, but his teaching. And mindfulness, you should come with the curiosity, why I am coming to this place. So if someone comes with that feeling, with the faith, with devotion and with the curiosity, he can feel the apprehensive nature of impermanence. This impermanence, it is a main, the teaching of Lord Buddha. So one can feel here. So why? How to feel that impermanence? Because the teacher, they have left there some energy in holy places. The one who comes with this faith, devotion and curiosity, when he steps here, definitely that energy will touch him. And that gives the result that he will feel the nature of impermanence. What is impermanence? Again, there can be a big discussion. But the impermanence means to detach from the material world. You will just slowly forget about the attachment. You will be detached from the material world. Then you get a peace. So that's why Lumbini, Bodh Gaya, Sarnath, Kushinagar, these are the center for the peace. Mental peace and one is a physical peace. So this Lumbini, we declare it as a fountain of all peace. So these ruins which you are seeing here, they are associated with Buddha and his teaching. So the backside of me is a big stupa. This stupa represents the existence of Lord Buddha. It is associated with his life. So these are the very holy things. But today, the pilgrim, the tourist, what they are coming here in Lumbini, it is increasing day by day. Mostly they come, just taking the photograph, walk around, not with the feeling of that, the peace. One way we are promoting tourism. Other way, we have some disadvantage of tourism too. So we need those people who really understand who is Buddha, what is his birthplace, and why I am coming here. What is my intention? Not for a picnic, not for just a photography, not for chatting with your friend. When you stay here, you should feel that yes, I am here in the birthplace of Buddha. This is a birthplace of my teacher, Dhamma, what he is teaching, and the Sangha, the community of the people who live with the peace and harmony, practicing the teaching of Buddha. So this sort of atmosphere is necessary for Lumbini. So the concept of master plan began in Lumbini from 1967 when U Thant, the UN Secretary General, who came to Lumbini, and during that time Lumbini was very much neglected. even all these ruins, they were covered it up. I mean, there was no road from Bhairava to Lumbini.
I see.
So there was no electricity, no drinking water. Just few years back.
Really?
So Uttant, being an devoted Buddhist, people say that he cried to see the condition of Lumbini. Then he went back to Kathmandu and he talked with our late king Mahendra to develop Lumbini as a pilgrim center as well as a tourist center. So Uttant in 1970, so he called the United Nations in a general convention to come forward to develop Lumbini. So in 1970, a committee was formed in United Nations. There were 13 nations and plus 2 other countries, they joined hand in later on. So you will be interested to know that, even some Islamic country like Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh, even Malaysia, they became a member of Lumbini committee. So this committee requested Professor Kenjo Tange to design a master plan for Lumbini. So now this master plan of Lumbini, which covers a 3 square mile of area, we have put the master plan in a Hoke Hotel, which you can take it from there. So this 3 square mile, he divided into 3 zones. So this is the place where Buddha came to the world, is known as Sacred Garden. It's a sacred, means, you should have a nature of sacredness.
Sure.
Then in the middle, we have a monastic zone. So we have, 42 different plots for the different monasteries. At present, we have more than 27 countries or Buddhist organizations. They are coming up. They are making their monastery. Then we have a last zone. It is called the New Lumbini Village. That especially for the residential area. Like a Hoke Hotel, Mikasa Hotel, pilgrim accommodation, and our staff quarter. That is totally away from here. The concept, in Buddhism, there are triple gem. Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. So this is the Buddha.
Okay.
Where the sacred garden is Buddha. Dhamma is the New Lumbini village. People, they come and they stay there, those who practice the Dhamma. Sangha is a monastic zone. Where all the Buddhist monk, the community practicing different way to reach the ultimate goal and sitting together with the peace and harmony. So that is a Sangha.
That's wonderful.
So that's a Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha. He introduced in his master plan very beautifully.
That's in fact, it is very good.
Then in a master plan, he just introduced 3 colors. Red color, blue color and green color.
And any significance of this
Yes.
color?
The red color is a color of a joy,
Okay.
color of a happiness. If you go to somebody's birthplace, you give a red flower.
Okay.
In a wedding ceremony, you present the red flower because the flower is for joy and happiness. The blue color, you have almost like a 15% of area is covered with the water.
That's true.
The blue represents the peace. And the green, 60% of the master plan will be afforested. We have trees and forest.
Okay.
This green represents the tranquility, peace, harmony, friendship, compassion, humanities, all that comes in the tranquility. So he introduced 3 colors in the master plan.
Wonderful.
It is one of the most beautiful master
It is.
plan in the
It is,
world.
Yes. And speaking about the reforestation, could you tell us which are the salt tree where Buddha was born?
This is again a little bit, controversy about the Sala tree. In my research, in my study, I found the tree is not a Sala tree. It must be a Ashoka tree.
Ashoka tree.
Ashoka tree. Because Sala in a Pali is a Sakha in a Sanskrit. Sakha is a branch.
Okay.
Maya hold the Sala of a tree.
Okay.
She hold the branch of a tree,
I see.
not the Sala tree.
Okay.
Because according to Chinese pilgrims record, according to some Sanskrit Buddhist literature and sculptural representation, you will find the Ashoka tree is represented as a nativity tree. Sala tree is a Mahaparinirvana tree.
Okay.
He passed away in Kushinara, lying in between 2 Sala trees.
And is there any Asuka tree
Yes,
around here?
yes. We planted one Ashoka tree other side.
Okay. Can we see?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Come.
Sure.
There are 11 types.
I see. This Saraka?
Indica.
Saraka indica.
The beauty part of this tree is, in the month of Baisakh,
Yes.
the whole tree becomes a flowering,
Ah.
full of flower.
Yes.
Even you hardly see the Bairimai is Badi Mai. Badi. It's a big mother. Big mother. And we have another one, Kanya Mai.
That is the Prajapati.
Prajapati. So there are
Younger
two Mai.
sister.
So then which we dated the break of 4th century AD.
Around here.
Yeah.
Are you going to do the sale here?
No, I'm not. No,
just over there.
just over there.
Just over there.
Just over there. Yeah. And now it became a private land. So any remaining cities there,
Yeah.
it's mostly this already occupied. So this is a private.
Luckily you can. This wall? This is the wall?
This is a wall.
And there are some
Some stone.
stones as well.
Stone.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is from which side? This is from
Vishnu Bhaga is always octagonal. Then comes the Brahma Bhaga. That's a Brahma Bhaga is square. Then on the top is a Shiva Bhaga. That's below, it looks like it's an octagonal. The site with the color of the stone maybe material is also different. This is a distinct type of tree. This is a very nice clean and it's a temple. This is ornamentation like we saw in a Silang aesthetic.
In Nigroda.
What is this?
And without
They find out and then
it is play of it.
so you haven't done anything at all.
The site is quite big. You can see the mound.
Now there is another wall.
It's a big mound.
Okay. That's true.
And the same wall,
Those walls also extend from here.
No, possibly.
Ini nyambung. Tadi kan nyambung. Ini rupanya coming in Kapilavastu after enlightenment. ये कमोमरेटिव हो गया। उसको स्मृत चेत कमोमरेटिव स्टोरी।
Now here it clearly shows us that this is the stupa part, the green one, the grass one. This is the earthen stupa. So later on this stupa extended up to that level, the brick. Even in the Gupta period it was a stupa-like. But in the third phase, around 12th, 13th century, when Buddhism started reviving here, people, they made a temple shape on the top. That's a projection which is known as Sikhara style. And the local people, they collected the brick from here, this carved brick, they put over there. So these carved bricks are not fixed properly. They are, just put one upon another without giving any proper ornamentation. So that was the last phase. And on the top of that, they put one phallus, that's a Sibalinga, broken Sibalinga. That indicates that the site was originally a Buddhist site and later on it was reoccupied by Brahminical cult. That is in a very late phase. So it shows that first step it is a earthen stupa, then you have a brick stupa, then on the top it is a brick temple.
But initially this stupa is
Came here, they mentioned that Buddha, he met his father in this place when he came to Kapilavastu after his enlightenment. And later
first
on,
meeting of father and son after enlightenment.
yes, and to commemorate this stupa, this place, people, they built a stupa. So it is commemorative stupa. And we have not opened the center. So we don't know any remains left in the core of this stupa that until and unless we don't open it, we cannot say it.
Is there any possibility of
Literature mentioned that Suddhodana, he invited Buddha to come to Kapilavastu. So literature mentioned that Suddhodana, he invited his son to visit to Kapilavastu. So Buddha accepted that. And during that time, Buddha said that, I will come to Kapilavastu, but I will not stay in a palace. So Suddhodana, he built a monastery for his son and the community of the monk. So according to Chinese literature, Chinese pilgrims' description, this place, what we are standing, comes exactly in the same location. And in between Kapilavastu and this place, we do not have any other potential archaeological site which we can claim as a Nigrodharama. So this is the only place. And we have enough archaeological evidence, plus this structure, there is some meaning. If we keep with the Buddha and his life, this is place where Buddha spent 40 days of his first visit. That is the place where Prajapati, that is the place where Prajapati presented yellow robe to Lord Buddha. And literature further mentioned that Rahula converted into a monkhood. So that mound which we saw, which is known as Rahula Stupa. So that is the place. Shariputra took Rahula there. He shaved the hair of Rahula and he gave a yellow dress and he became a novice for the first time. So these are the evidence we can claim this is Nigrodharama.
Thank you.